Hey everybody, what's up? Chris Asperk here, Winding Road Magazine. Today I'm here with the 2018 Volvo XC90 all-wheel drive T6. This is a fantastic looking SUV. Just take a look at it. Got some really nice LED headlights in the front there. They even called their daytime running light treatment Thor's Hammer, which actually makes me laugh a little bit, coming from Sweden. This particular version is the top dog Inscription trim level with a decked out as tested price of about $74,000. It is very well equipped. This is Volvo's large C-segment SUV entry, competing with the likes of the Audi Q7, the BMW X5, a 21-inch wheel package with all-season tires in this particular vehicle. Let's go ahead and take a look in the trunk. Being a three-row SUV, you can see that the luggage capacity is definitely a little bit short with the third row up, but fortunately the third seating row is pretty easy and convenient to fold down. Lots of trunk space. And we do have a nice space saver spare in the back there. Some air tanks here for the optional air suspension system in all four corners, adjustable height and adjustable firmness. Power operated lift gate. Off to the interior. Wow. Well, personally, I think the styling has been absolutely nailed by Volvo. I think the car has a great design that's fairly neutral, meaning it's, it's not overly aggressive. It's very timeless. It looks good. It's going to appeal to both men and women. I think it's really the looker in this segment of vehicles, and that theme continues to the interior, the styling and feeling of this interior, the material selection, the colors, the contrasts. It's awesome. You really feel like you're in an upscale, nicely crafted luxury vehicle. I really like this caramel on dark wood here, and the leather with the stitching on the dashboard. It has a very upscale feeling. The leather is very rich, very supple, like these little accents, this little Swedish flag that's attached to the seating surface here. Little Easter egg here, since 1959. Just proud of the fact that Volvo did pioneer the seat belts back in the 50s. Yeah, here we go. This is a great looking car. We're going to go ahead, fire it up. It's a little bit unconventional. Got the key transponder in my pocket, which is actually leather finished, high quality feeling, and it matches the interior. Kind of a cool feature of Volvo. So, starting it by rotating, actually, this engine start. We're greeted with a full LCD cluster here, which is nice looking. The refresh rate isn't quite as high as some of the competitors, so sometimes it's a little bit chunky or blocky to move, but it still works rather well and it's easy to read. Infotainment System, on the other hand, it can take a little while to boot up sometimes. Looks like it's coming up to speed pretty quickly now. But it's very good looking, and I think the concept they have behind this infotainment system is quite good, but unfortunately the performance hardware is a step or two behind the concept, meaning the touchscreen, it is a full touchscreen with only like one, home or return button here. It gets a little bit laggy, and it can be not as smooth or as fluid as people are to expect given the days of smartphones and high performance tablets and whatnot. So let's say the interface is like the latest iOS, but the hardware is kind of still at an Apple iPhone 4 or 5 level, meaning it's kind of laggy sometimes, and it doesn't quite give you the slick performance I'd say it really could. And because everything is driven by this touchscreen, you're really reliant on it. So if it gets into a situation where, you know, it's kind of wound up hardware wise, it's busy, and the applications kind of slow it down, you're stuck. You're waiting for the system to kind of clear its throat and move on. But anyway, we'll get more to the infotainment later. Once again, cockpit materials, very nice leather-bound heated steering wheel. I do like the controls here on the steering wheel. They work rather well, and the ergonomics are good. Got a couple buttons down here. So we got a volume knob, we've got a play button, we've got track forward, track back, we've got a button for our power operated glove box, we've got defrost, we've got rear defrost, and emergency 4-way flashers. Nice drive mode selection down here. That will give us a couple different driving modes. It starts out in comfort by default, but you can go to an off-road, which raises up the suspension. You can go to dynamic, which drops the suspension, changes the throttle, pedal, and driving response, and firms everything up a little bit. Or individual, where you can tailor the individual adjustable components to your tastes. So yeah, I'm kind of more of a dynamic guy. So seems to have gotten a little bit louder too. So let's go ahead and take a look under the hood. So we haven't talked about the propulsion for the XC90 yet. So under the hood is kind of a surprise. It is Volvo's 2-liter 4-cylinder unit. And it is blasted up via a supercharger, mechanically driven, and a turbocharger. So it is a twin-charged engine, all the way up to a surprising 316 horsepower. So, Volvo, come on. No. So, there we go. We have Volvo's 2-liter 4-cylinder engine with a mechanically driven supercharger and an exhaust-driven turbocharger, which brings us to 316 horsepower and 295 pound-feet of torque. How does that work in a large 3-row SUV? Well, we're going to go take it for a drive and find out. Packaging looks pretty tidy. We've got a big foam sound deadening cover here. I'm sure that's part of the technology used to make this 4-cylinder try to seem as refined and smooth and quiet as the other vehicles in the segment, which are going to have 6 or 8-cylinder power. Otherwise, you can't see much. It's all pretty tidy in terms of packaging. I don't have the appropriate tools at the moment to take this cover off the engine, but got a nice little protected post, jumper post for the positive terminal. I assume the battery's tucked away in the trunk or in the body of the SUV somewhere. There we go. All right, back in the trunk. Okay, mechanically operated shifter. This is not a shift-by-wire system. It does take a surprising amount of effort to bring it back from park into gear. First impression is the powertrain seems pretty smooth. It's kind of hard to tell that it's a 4-cylinder providing the motivation under the hood. Suspension also equally smooth. I really do like the ride quality of air suspension on these luxury vehicles. It gives you a pillowy feeling that you really rarely get in steel coil spring suspension systems. So it's already gone into start-stop. It has a very aggressive start-stop system in this car that takes every opportunity it can to turn the engine off when you're stopped. It does a pretty good job, especially considering it's a 4-cylinder. All right, so right away, the power delivery of this engine it's not the most linear thing in the world. So because you have two forms of supercharging, really, you have the mechanical supercharger, you've got the turbocharger, that are both trying to provide extra positive pressure to the intake side of this engine. To be fair, it's really difficult to modulate that in a perfectly linear way. So you're going to have times where the torque seems to rise in a way that's not according to the gas pedal. So you're holding the gas pedal at a constant position, and the torque of the car is kind of increasing and decreasing. So it clearly drives like a boosted engine. It's not going to be confused with a large displacement engine, as you know, many automakers are trying to get these tabletop flat torque curves out of these engines, so they drive less like boosted engines and more like really big, normally aspirated, you know, engines with predictable torque curves. The power delivery can be a little bit lumpy sometimes from this engine, and that's exacerbated by the fact that the accelerator pedal seems to have not much travel. It's very short in its travel. So the drivability, I wouldn't say it suffers, because it's more of a quirk than, you know, a negative thing. So it drives differently. And the Swedes have always been kind of quirky with their cars, especially Saab. So I'm not going to go out and say, oh, it's a bad attribute. You just have to drive it and see what you think. It just drives a little bit differently. The transmission is Volvo's own 8-speed automatic. It is a transverse application, meaning this platform is similarly laid out like a front-wheel drive vehicle, with the engine sitting transversely and the transmission off to the side of that, versus other vehicles in this category which are going to be not longitudinally mounted from a powertrain perspective. Ride quality is very good in this default comfort setting, although there is just a little bit of pitch and swimminess to it. So it's not perfect, but it's clearly biased more towards the comfort side of things. We're going to go ahead and put it in dynamic, just because I prefer dynamic chassis control most of the time. So when you switch it to dynamic, it jumps to dynamic, meaning the throttle mapping change in the car actually kind of surges ahead a little bit, because your throttle position, now when the car's in dynamic, is going to demand more torque and get the car going. It's kind of interesting how they did that. Most cars, I think, when you switch modes like that, they kind of damp the response, so the changeover isn't as abrupt as it feels in this car. There we've got a little bit of telltale 4-cylinder thrumming that is going on at idle there. Oh, that was kind of a surge. I apologize, I'm heading for this into the sun here. I will try to turn in a couple of locks. Pavement is quite broken here, and the truck's riding very well with no kind of squeaking or rattling. The platform itself feels very stiff. In this very regular stop-and-go suburban driving, I think that's where this XC90 really excels. So, as we'll get to later in the report, it's not a particularly sporting vehicle compared to some other vehicles in this segment, but just, you know, cruising smooth, nice and easy. The response of all the controls, it's at home just driving normally. See a nice heads-up display here, which currently is showing me speed and traffic speed limit. Although the speed limit display, I don't know if you can see that on the camera here, it's kind of squished and scrunched. Kind of curious why they did that, considering here in the cluster the speed limit sign is shown pretty much perfectly. And I have noticed from time to time it shows you the incorrect speed, so I'm not sure if it's map-based data that it's gathering from or if it's actually recognizing the traffic signs on the road like some systems do these days. Now with the AC going, there's quite a bit of torque demand on the engine, and the start-stop system did not activate this time, so there is a bit of vibration and throbbing felt in the chassis of this car. So I've engaged the driving assist feature for automatic driving at lower speeds. Oh, it kicked off. A little green steering wheel turned off there. No lane markers on the right side to help me there, so I will engage the pilot assist later in a more favorable condition and see how the system works and how the system responds. Which is Volvo's system of operating the radar guided cruise control and the lane assisted steering simultaneously, so at low speeds the car can nearly drive itself with driver attention to the traffic conditions. Of course, it's not a fully autonomous system. Navigation system seems to work decently well, though it's not the most glamorous or sophisticated system considering the price of the car. It gives you basic, it says 3D here, but it looks pretty 2D to me. Oh, here we go. So that brings us to a 3D version. But there's no Google Earth. There's no, fancy 3D buildings or landscapes or extra features. It's pretty straightforward. HVAC system is contained within the touchscreen environment, which is not my favorite thing to do, because something simple like turning on and off the AC, which I think should require just a hard button, you have to go through multiple menus and search for it to perform those features. And right now, let's say I wanted to go off auto. How do I do it? Well, I gotta dive into this system here and figure out how to mess with it. So I really do prefer some hard buttons and knobs for those kind of features. All right, the car's powered down. I'm going to go ahead and see if I can demonstrate some of the lag that you experience from the car's infotainment and HVAC control system when you power the car up. So, car's on. It's taking its sweet merry time to come up. Still can't control the HVAC or anything. Loading, loading, loading. So now if you want to change the radio station or do anything, you're stuck with a whole lot of waiting right now. I can probably do the HVAC. No, can't turn the HVAC, can't do anything. There we go, now we're getting somewhere. That's why I don't like these systems, because there's no knobs, there's nothing you can just quick change the things you need to change. Still can't touch my radio station. Here we go. Now you can see how there it's moving, how unresponsive this system is. Well, it's really kind of, yeah. It's not smooth, it's not quick, it's not snappy, it does not feel like a modern smartphone. So if you're gonna try to pull this kind of system off, it's gotta feel at least as good as your smartphone. And we're just not there yet. now that it's finally booted up, it's not bad. It's still not quite as smooth as an iPhone would be or a modern Android Auto. But there's these times where the system's busy or it's loading up and it's just frustrating to use, and it's definitely not as usable as a regular knobbed system would be. So that's a good demonstration of my frustrations there. On the good side, the backup camera is pretty sweet. So it offers a rather conventional view in the center of the display there, but along the outsides, it's like an extreme wide angle that really gets you a nice view of what's going on around you. So it's kind of a combination of a top view system and a traditional, straightforward backup camera. So you get quite a bit of viewing range with this backup camera system, and the resolution is quite good. Good bright colors, nice resolution. Overall, I kind of like it. We also have this 365 degree viewer, which is 360 degree, I'm sorry, which is not quite as useful. I think other companies do a little bit better job of integrating these top view systems, but it gives you an idea of what's going on around your car, and it's still infinitely better than some of the other cars at this price range. Once again, looking at you, Cadillac. So innovative infotainment. I think the system does a pretty good job of itself. I really like the backup angle more so than the reverse, this 360 degree thing. So that is one of the plus sides of this Volvo infotainment system. Ventilated seats are currently on and they work exceptionally well. I have to say, in dynamic mode, the low throttle applications like driving around town makes this engine really jumpy. It's not happy driving slow speeds in dynamic mode. So I'm going to go ahead and put it back to comfort for everyday use. Like I said, immediately you can feel the difference in the mapping of the throttle pedal. Another feature, which I can't show you due to copyright reasons with music playing in the background, but it does have the optional Bowers & Wilkins 1400 watt 19 speaker stereo system, which is actually really good and a relative bargain at about $3,200 compared to some of the other high-end systems in these vehicles. I like it. Now, it's not perfect. There are some surprising things that make the system not quite perfect. And one of which is a strange, surround sound equalization, meaning that the sound, especially if you have vocals or talking on the radio, has a very 3D, artificial, concert hall echoey effect to it. And you hear it sometimes in music it's not apparent. But if you have a DJ talking on the radio, it's going to sound very echoey and artificial. And for an audiophile grade system, I can understand when you want to experiment with things like surround sound and 3D sound and noise shaping and whatnot, but then you got to be able to turn it on or off or adjust it. And I've looked everywhere and I found no place inside the settings for this audio system that allow you to toggle that on or off, right? So actually it's kind of nice in the sound area, in the tone. They do give you basic bass and treble and subwoofer, which is cool, and they give you an equalizer, which you can go through anything from 75 up to 16,000 kilohertz and really shape the noise how you want to, or the sound. But you can't turn off this stupid 3D sound thing that they got going on. And it really surprised me for an audiophile level system, and it will annoy people that are really serious about sound. So Volvo, I don't know why you did that. Go ahead and close that, but otherwise the system has quite a bit of headroom, has excellent frequency response. Kind of unique to this audio system is that the 250 millimeter subwoofer is actually built into the subframe, or to the frame of the vehicle, the chassis of the car. It's not built in an enclosure, which is unique, meaning that it doesn't compromise interior or storage space. And despite that clever design, it does not, it does a great job, right? You get great frequency response, gets down to a really low bass extension. It's an interesting system, so it hits some low bass notes well, but some mid bass notes it feels a little bit softer on. But overall, the clarity and the soundstage of the system is good. So other than that equalization issue, that noise shaping issue I mentioned, it can really sound good. So it's really a top level stereo, and I would absolutely recommend it if you're serious into audio. So I was too busy talking about the audio, and we went through some corners back there. I wanted to mention that, especially in the comfort setting, it's not the sportiest, sharpest turning vehicle on the planet. So turn-in is a little bit mushy. Body control, there's a little bit of lean to it. It's not too bad, but overall, I would say the chassis composure has a very lumbering feeling to it. So you throw it into a corner and it kind of waddles around a little bit. It feels like, yeah, this is not the thing I want to do right now. So we're going to go ahead and put it back into dynamic so I can push it in some corners here and see if that firms it up a bit. So dynamic, it turned off the start-stop system. I'm going to go ahead and that's manual. Go ahead and power brake it and kind of launch it off the line here when it turns green and see what kind of acceleration we can get. So with a mechanically driven supercharger backing the turbocharger, I think we'll be able to build some boost on the line and take off in a hurry. So that's not too bad. For what it is, I think it's great performance, but then again, it is a $75,000 vehicle. So you're going to be comparing it to 6 and 8 cylinder vehicles, which admittedly are a little bit quicker than that. Interestingly enough, we got a slight chirp of the tires because the front axle is permanently driven in this setup with a Haldex style clutch all-wheel drive system that transfers power to the rear tires when needed. Kind of surprised that the system didn't know what I was about to do and lock up a little bit more prematurely, so there wasn't that front wheel spin. So it doesn't seem to be the most proactive system in terms of transferring that power to the back. So that is a pet peeve of mine, is when these types of all-wheel drive systems introduce things like torque steer and front-wheel drive feelings to the chassis dynamics, because top-shelf systems shouldn't do that. Torque response is quite good, so ignoring the lumpy delivery I discussed before. And the transmission does a good job of shifting quickly and predictably when needed. Don't have too many complaints about the transmission. Alright, even in dynamic here, lumbering is still an adjective I'd use to describe the chassis performance. It doesn't turn corners like a Q7 or an X5 will, so you're going to have to bear that in mind. It's really a car that's much happier driving at 6/10, 7/10 than it is pushed beyond that. And, you know, like, you can firm it up with the driving mode selection here, but if you just put it in dynamic, then you're also going to have that annoying surging throttle pedal. So I think the hot setup for this car would be to leave the suspension in dynamic, but move that throttle pedal back to comfort or normal, so you don't get that overly jumpy, surging nature that you get with the dynamic response of the throttle pedal. Engine sound isn't bad for a 4-cylinder. It's nicely throaty, but nicely muted. It's refined. I think using the tools or using the components that they have, they've done a great job of making this 4-cylinder viably compete in a world of 6 and 8 cylinders. Now, if it makes sense to do so, I think that's another debate, because there are very few advantages with the setup that they've done. It becomes mechanically more complicated. The acceleration isn't quite at the level of the 6-cylinder versions, and honestly, with this heavily boosted engine and this heavy vehicle, overall fuel economy is roughly the same as you're going to get out of the 6 cylinders as well. There's no real advantage there, unless you're talking about driving environments outside the US where they're taxed heavily on engine displacement. So not a concern for US customers, but there are places in the world where taxation is heavily based on engine displacement. So a 2-liter engine would be advantageous over a 3-liter or larger engine. So, but if you're not subjected to that kind of taxation environment, then there's not a lot of advantage for this 4-cylinder engine. In fact, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and say it. I wish Volvo would have a 5-cylinder engine or even a 6-cylinder engine to put in this thing, because I like Volvo's 5 and 6-cylinder engines a whole lot more than I like their 4-cylinder engines. And especially at $75,000, you expect a little bit more. Steering itself is pretty firmly weighted in the dynamic here, but it's kind of rubbery and not a lot of feeling going on. Boy, though, just go back and mention how nice the interior of this car is. So let's take another look at the exterior of this car. I think the 21-inch VO package with the Scorpion all-season tires are great looking. 275 40 21s, very nice and chunky. Nice to see some real exhaust tips on the back of this thing. Chrome strip with the Inscription trim level. Let's go ahead and put an off-road mode and see what that does to the suspension height. Key not found, removed from vehicle. That's not true. It's right here, buddy. All right, off-road. Oh, there we go. Yeah, it's definitely raised up a bit there. Not too many people are going to be taking their XC90s off-road, but it's nice to know that you can. Let's go drop it in dynamic and see how much it goes down. There, found the key this time. Dynamic. Front end's dropping first. Now the back end is dropping. Front end again. Back end again. All right, I think we're back down to dynamic. Yep, there we go. There's a bit of adjustability there. It's not the most adjustable vehicle I've seen. Some of the others in this class will offer a little bit more adjustability than that, but it is enough to give you some extra ground clearance if you're going to be going through some deep snow or off-roading. You know what? I forgot what I was going to do. Let's go ahead and take a look at the rest of the vehicle. So we've got some storage in here, some cup holders, power outlet, center console area. Just makes you want to touch it, you know. Material quality is great. Touchscreen has a nice anti-reflective coating on it, but you still suffer from glare and gooey fingerprints. So that is one of the disadvantages of these touch systems, is under some conditions, it's not going to read all that well. But otherwise, for the capabilities that you have, the amount of things that you can adjust with this system, the usability is pretty decent and it's pretty intuitive. When you have a large list of things, though, like this, it's kind of tedious sometimes to scroll through this big list of satellite radio stations. There we go. We can get to a little bit bigger list, and we can search. How are we going to search for that? You know, if you should have a number pad right there, you shouldn't have to go extra for this number pad. And so you can see some of that lag I'm talking about. Shade 45. Oh, hey. How you doing, Mom? Backseat room. Once again, awesome build quality. Plenty of room back here. Real nice climate control display. Looks like it's currently locked. I'm not quite sure how I unlock that. I'll have to check that out later. There we go. Really nice climate control interface here for the rear seat passengers. Very upscale feeling. Very nice leather. Oh, okay. Mini and somewhat useless cup holders. About a baby bottle is the only thing you can fit in there. Maybe a Red Bull, but better than nothing. And real nice. Everything back here again. Cool. Hey, the sun's been kind of kicking around, but that's what's going to happen with the family life. So, yeah, plenty of room. I'm about 6 feet tall. I've got some headroom. Beautiful open sky type panoramic sunroof. It's a great sized family vehicle. So I do have to point one thing out, is that this is definitely not the first XC90 I've driven. This is the 2018 model. I drove a really early car about 1.5 years ago, and I'm not sure if that was a 16 or a 17, but it was substantially worse in some ways. It was also a very high level equipped vehicle, but a lot of the software driven things were more buggy and filled with issues. And I've heard that Volvo has addressed some of these issues and have done some software updates to improve some of these problems. And I can really feel that in this newer 2018 model. It feels like a little bit more polished. Everything seems to work a little bit better. That's software driven. And it went from a car that I definitely wouldn't have recommended back then due to some of the issues I was having, to something that's a whole lot better at this point. And I've encountered very few bugs or issues during my week with this newer XC90. So good job on Volvo for aggressively addressing some of those issues. When you get cars that are as comprehensive and luxurious and complicated as cars are these days, there's bound to be these little software bug type issues, and they're going to have to be addressed in one way or another. Being a Volvo, you know that safety is going to be a high priority for this vehicle, and it has a very comprehensive set of driver assistance and safety features. And I had an interesting situation earlier today, which unfortunately I did not have a chance to tape, or I wasn't running tape at the time. But I had a vehicle that was a little bit closer than this white van up here, and it was kind of an old, crappy, I'm not going to give the make of the car, but it was definitely an older, beat-up car. And the brake lights were not functioning, and the car had decided to do a quick brake and turn maneuver. And I was kind of paying attention to the road. I mean, I was driving, I wasn't distracted by anything. But the car noticed the potentially dangerous situation before I did because of the lack of brake lights, and I was kind of heading into the sun too. And the car gave me the collision warning alert and pre-energized the braking system. And I had already noticed that something potentially dangerous was about to arise, but the car noticed before I did, and it was ready to brake quickly. And it was, I would say, probably 9 times out of 10 I've interacted with these systems. It's done so in an annoying way, And this 1 out of 10 time was a very useful way the system interacted with me. So if I didn't have the system, I probably wouldn't have gotten into an accident, but the system allowed me to respond to a potentially dangerous situation more quickly than if I would have not had the system. So I think the system works quite well. I think compared to the earlier car I drove, which had a lot of false positive responses for the automatic braking and collision avoidance system, this updated 2018 vehicle has a better system that is going to give you less unwanted intervention of the system. So I wanted to share that the systems are getting better and better with each vehicle generation and each model year. And I think that these systems have their place, and as they get better, we're going to go, even driving enthusiasts are going to go from an attitude of, oh, I don't need that, oh, that's just annoying, to, wow, that's actually pretty useful, and I'm coming around on that myself. So that's a little anecdote about the XC90 and the collision avoidance braking system. And it's the kind of things that you expect when you're getting into a Volvo. You know that they're going to put a large emphasis on the safety aspect. So you can see right here, the car does have a radar guided cruise control system, but unfortunately the system is calibrated in a way that it's really slow to respond to changes in traffic and acceleration. So if you're going to rely on the system to accelerate you away from a red light, or back there when the vehicle in front of me was turning, once the vehicle's gone, the system just is so conservatively calibrated and so slow to respond that you feel constantly like you need to override the system, because either it's just not moving quick enough, or you're impeding traffic, feel like you're going to get honked at. And that ultimately makes the system not entirely that useful, because what's the point of having a driver assistance or semi-autonomous driving system that you constantly need to override because it doesn't drive in a way that's natural or a way that works for you? So compared to other systems on vehicles like this, I think Volvo needs to make the system a little bit more aggressive and a little bit more natural feeling in order to really feel useful. I'm sure we'll come up with a driving situation again at a red light when the light turns green. But if you just rely on the system to drive the car, it accelerates so slowly. It's not very useful in my opinion. The system just doesn't keep up with traffic, and that traffic's accelerating pretty slowly up there. Other similar systems will even have different settings that you can adjust the aggressiveness of the response of the system. This system, I did not find any settings that change the response of the radar cruise control. You know, it's okay if it's this slow, as long as you could change the settings and make it a little bit more aggressive. But the way it is, it's not usable in the real world, in my opinion. And stop and go traffic, I think that it would be quite useful, especially because you also have Volvo's Pilot Assist, which right now I have it on, so it can take care of the steering and the driving duties at lower speeds. And that's when you really have slow changes in speed. And I think the actual lane keeping portion, it's going to make me apply steering here. The lane keeping portion is among the best. It's actually quite good on the Volvo. But the dynamic, braking and accelerating portion of the driver assist definitely needs a little bit of work to be among the best in the class. Handles this corner. Oh, no, look, it took me right over into that lane. That's why you need to pay attention when using these driver assistance systems. They're not quite ready for hands-off autonomous driving. They tend to do things like that every once in a while. Once again, traffic is just pulling away from me. I'll override the system. So bottom line, Volvo XC90 T6 Inscription trim level. What do I think? Well, coming into it, you know, on first impressions, this SUV really feels like it has the makings to be a class leader. It has absolutely stunning styling, inside and out, great material selection, very upscale feeling, impressive technology. But when you spend some time with it, you start to see a little bit of quirkiness and even some shortcomings with it. So first and foremost, I think the powertrain, it's kind of daring to go with a 2-liter in this class, and all things considered, the 2-liter does a great job of a 2-liter, but you have to remember at this price class, $75,000, it's competing with 6 cylinders, and unfortunately the 4-cylinder concept does not provide any clear advantage. So it doesn't offer any better fuel economy, and the performance is not quite there compared to the 6 cylinders, and the refinement is not quite there compared to the 6 cylinders. So ultimately you have a concept that doesn't offer a clear advantage compared to the competitors. So it could be a little bit more refined, could pack a little bit more punch, and it certainly could be the power delivery could be a little bit less elasticy, or, you know, non-linear compared to the 6-cylinder competition. Chassis composure, it's definitely biased towards comfort, but if you start driving this vehicle in a sporty way and have expectations of handling and sportiness, you're going to ultimately be a little bit disappointed. So the chassis dynamics are, I keep saying lumbering, and that, I know that sounds bad. It's not really that bad, but it's not sporty. So you get a lot of chassis movement, and it's kind of soft and wallowy, and it's not a vehicle that gives you confidence to throw it into some bends. So you go drive an X5, you go drive a Q7, and you can throw those into some bends and carve up some back roads and have some enjoyment while still offering similar levels of comfort and adjustability to the chassis. So I think the Volvo is a little bit more conservative in the chassis department. Infotainment, I think it's a great concept. Ultimately, the execution is just a little bit lacking in terms of the hardware. So every once in a while, the system gets a little bit laggy, and being largely touchscreen driven, you got to go through some menus to get to where you want to go, which is a little bit more time consuming and challenging and distracting ultimately than having a few more buttons. But those are my primary complaints. On the positive side, I love the styling. I love the material selection and the colors on the inside, and the technology is impressive. The driver assistance systems generally work well. They could offer some improvements, but the car is very safe. It's going to offer, you know, for somebody who's just looking for a regular driving vehicle, it's not, you know, not the ultimate driving enthusiast, not looking for something that's also going to be fun to toss around when kids aren't in the car. There's a whole lot to like about the Volvo. If you're a true driving enthusiast and you want something that plays the family truckster role, but also is a little bit more enjoyable of a drive when you're feeling the need for speed, then you might want to look towards some of the other vehicles in this class. So it's still definitely one of my top 3 choices in this class. It's a very good vehicle overall, but it does have a few quirks and shortcomings that you need to consider if you're a driving enthusiast. So, but you know, maybe Volvo will address some of these things in the future. I'd love to see a turbocharged 5-cylinder in this thing. So if they wanted to make a Polestar tuned version with a 5-cylinder and a little bit tighter chassis, man, I think they'd really be onto something. So there, the collision alert stepped in. I was fully aware of the setup there. I was fully aware of the driving situation, and my feet were on the brakes, but it's gonna beep at you every once in a while because it is a Volvo, and it's gonna remind you to drive carefully. But yeah, anyway, Polestar 5-cylinder, come on Volvo, get on that. That'd be sweet. So This is Chris Osberg, Winding Road. I hope you enjoyed the review. Feel free to comment below. Feel free to subscribe if you like what you see. We'll be coming back at you with more test drives, more reviews, more footage, more hoonage, and more fun behind the wheel. So, thanks for watching. We'll talk to you later, and have a good one. See ya.